Well, this will be another Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading us. Some interesting sins coming up, actually. And if you have one, feel free to share. Anyway, on the way, a grotesquely groggy Galleon, a fateful fate, a libidinous lilo lover, and a studenty sausage scandal. All coming up. Just going to do a straw poll here. If a cheese sandwich fell off a cliff and landed on your head, do you think it would hurt, Matt?
No.
Bobby?
Yes, especially if it was heavy cheese and a baguette, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it probably would. Anyway, got some interesting answers coming in on that.
Well, it depends on how how wussy you are and whether that tiny pinch hurts or that little.
It doesn't depend on that. It's a cheese sandwich from a cliff. Of course, it's going to hurt.
I know, but some people it will hurt more than others.
Hang on, if this cheese sandwich is wrapped up. And
in a brick.
Yes, and is really solid, then yes, it's going to hurt. But if it's a normal 2 pieces of bread and a load of cheese in the middle, it is not going to hurt.
What if it's a soft cheese bap?
It doesn't, a bap. Oh, yes, now
doesn't
bap.
hurt as much, does it?
Okay, we're moving on now. Yes. So, confessions@bbc.co.uk, and this is from Davy Jones, not my real name, of course. Father Simon and the Flying Angels of Mercy, having just heard your confession from Ed the zookeeper. He did too, you remember, a couple of weeks back. It reminded me of my rather nautical tale, which took place nearly 35 years ago. I was a young second officer sailing on large container ships between major ports in northwest Europe and Canada. When I recall what happened on this one particular westbound voyage, the barnacles on the back of my neck stand up with pride to salute the good old red ensign. Each voyage from Europe to Canada and back involved a double crossing of the North Atlantic Ocean. Being a British flag vessel, the MV had a full complement of British officers. The crew comprised of an old boatswain with a peg leg and a black eye patch, and his motley bunch of ABs, which is of course able-bodied seamen, all from the Liverpool pool of seafarers. A tough bunch of salty sea dogs who, when on leave, resided in the local park under the bench and badly lit smoke rooms of public houses, waiting until they were shanghaied and sent to the next available ship needing crew.
This is a movie.
It is almost, yes. Their only possessions in life were a British seaman's card, discharge book, and a few items of clothing in a small cardboard box tied up with string. Before leaving Le Havre at the end of the 9-day ocean crossing, you sensed bad weather was on the way, when the ship's rats were seen throwing themselves into the traps and the cockroaches were scurrying down the gangway. You get the picture. The voyage started bumpy as we dropped the outbound French port pilot and gradually became worse as we passed Land's End. Within 24 hours, we were in a very uncomfortable, full-blown force 9 storm with high seas and swell. The ship began rolling and pitching violently, reducing the ship's speed from 18 to 8 knots. Now, on day 2 of the voyage, the weather moderated enough for the chief officer to send me out onto the decks to perform a safety check of the cargo and the ship, also for any storm damage. This involved a full inspection of the decks with the boatswain and one AB to assist in any hard work, if necessary, because deck officers didn't get their hands dirty. Halfway through the inspection, we noticed that one of the tank containers had lost its customs seal and was dripping a brownish-coloured liquid from the discharge manifold onto the deck. The boatswain, with a keen nose for alcohol, took a taste. He waited a second. His eyes opened wide as he exclaimed, "It's whiskey."
Oh, yes.
It didn't surprise me one bit, I said, and went on to tell this Jack Sparrow lookalike that it was quite possibly a highly valued brand of malt, as we tended to carry a lot in bulk from Scotland to Canada on this particular service. So I told the boatswain that I wouldn't report the leaking tank container, as it didn't cause a danger to the ship, and I wouldn't stop the leak and replace the customs seal until just before we docked into Montreal a week later. The boatswain and the AB looked like they'd just won the lottery. Now, this is where I seek forgiveness. 1. For keeping quiet about the dripping tank container and allowing the boatswain and his crew to use a free alcohol tap for a week. 2. From the owners of the container for the damage and the loss of over 1,000 litres, which is 1 metric tonne, of an alcohol-based concentrate. What's that? Lastly, and mostly, from the owners of the cargo. The Canadian Zoological Research Society, who couldn't understand why the dead 400-pound gorilla they were transporting in the tank from a zoo in Europe arrived without the preserving fluid.
Oh, what?
that it had been shipped in.
Oh, I say.
I would like to state that the crew suffered no ill effects from their consumption of large quantities of the liquid, and when they eventually paid off the ship in Felixstowe, each took home a bottle of the stuff as part of their duty-free allowance. Yours repentantly, Davy Jones, not my real name. So they'd been drinking for a week. They'd been drinking gorilla juice, basically. Gorilla preservative, which presumably, well, he says it's an alcohol-based concentrate, so it did taste of alcohol, but it also tasted of gorilla, or dead gorilla. Anyway, it's a cracking story. Thank you, Davey. Let's see what happens here with Sister Rebecca.
That is an amazing story.
Yes.
What a twist. I don't think we've had a confession with such an amazing twist.
We just don't know what's coming. Don't know what's coming.
Horrified. I don't know what to say about this. 1,000 litres went missing. Does that mean they couldn't have drank 1,000 litres, presumably? It just leaked and some of it went
some of it
overboard,
leaked and some of it,
and some of them ended up in their stomachs.
So.
They didn't obviously suffer any harm from it.
Don't
in
try
fact,
this
they
at home,
enjoyed
by
it
the
so
way.
much.
If you have a gorilla, a dead gorilla, sort of in formaldehyde,
kids,
leave it alone, kids. Don't.
They enjoyed it so much they took a bottle with them. It's not like it caused them any problems. So I'm going to forgive because it's also a fantastic story.
So I wonder, we should hear from the Canadian Zoological Research Society. Anyway, what do you think, Sister Bobby from the Priory?
Gorillas in the mist, gorillas in the fridge, gorillas in the tank.
We've had all kinds of gorillas, haven't we? Yes.
Actually, I don't think I can forgive because you didn't know it wouldn't cause any ill effects. And I think what I'm surprised at is they didn't know a good whiskey or even a bad whiskey. But
you don't know what gorilla juice tastes like.
I would
might
know
taste
it
like a
wouldn't
good
taste like
malt.
whiskey. I doubt it. But I think it's way too dangerous to play with. I mean, did he know about the cargo? Did he know it was...
I don't know. That's not clear. He just says... yeah, he probably did.
Yeah, he did. I would say you are playing with fire.
Playing with fire.
Yeah, so no, unforgiven, way too dangerous.
All right, okay, let's see what Matthew makes
We
of
could
this
be
then.
onto something if it does turn out that gorillas pickled in whatever preservative does
And
taste like
alcohol-based
whiskey.
concentrate.
Yeah, that would really be something. And that comes up on the duty free, does it? Anything to declare that?
It
Well,
would
I've got
be
this
like-
gorilla juice.
Like that bottle of spirit from your holiday that sits on the back shelf. Yes,
Looks a bit
gorilla, I
green.
think, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, it's perfectly normal. I'm definitely going to forgive, even though I would personally, I'd make it one of my life's little laws not to get on a boat where one of the sailors has got an eye patch and a peg leg, or indeed a gorilla pickled in one of the containers. So I'm going to forgive just for that.
We just had a very interesting conversation. Very, very interesting. What did it boil down to, Matt? How did you boil that conversation?
I'm not even going there. Not even.
Very good. Anyway, here's tonight's confession. Thank you very much indeed. We get into so much trouble if we even told you anything about it. This comes from Dragonhead. Okay, this is a person. Calm yourself, Bobby.
It wasn't me.
It was all about you, though. Dragonhead says, "Dear Lord Simon, the fair ladies, and the court idiot."
What?
I'm just reading it out. My terrible deed occurred in a small hamlet back in the Dark Ages. Let's call it the early 1970s, in a North Kent village. At that time, I attended the small village school. The feudal system was alive and well at the school, with the senior boys being the equivalent of noble knights, and the juniors being regarded as the squires, serfs, footpads, and village idiots. I myself was at that time considered to be a serf, and for reasons that I will foretell next, I looked on with envy at the noble knights. For it happened every year around the time of the May Day bank holiday, our school would hold a fete. The main purpose of the fete was to raise funds for the school through the usual sale of homemade cakes, bric-a-brac and various games of chance. But to entice the village population into the fete, our school also put on displays of country dancing, maypole dancing, and the highlight of the day, a reenactment of the tale of St. George and the Dragon. This reenactment was legendary amongst all the school staff, pupils and villagers, as it involved very fine costumes, a well-rehearsed script narrated by the headmaster, and an 8-foot-long, bottle-green, 3-person controlled papier-mâché dragon. Now, I mentioned early that as a serf, small Weasley junior kid, I was envious of the noble knights, big senior boys. For it was a long-held tradition in our school that the noble man chosen to play the good St. George would be selected from the ranks of the noble knights. I, as a serf, was not eligible for selection, but this did not stop my feelings of jealousy, as the lucky chap was announced in front of the whole school assembly. To add fuel to my burning fire of ambition, the fair maid who I had my eye on as a potential dance partner for me, who could just about make it bearable for being forced to wear a smock for the dances. These days, different times. These days are long gone, but I wouldn't mind wearing a smock every now and again.
Okay.
But you can wear one, it's fine.
Okay. Was also chosen to be his princess. It was also decreed that my part in this year's reenactment would be the hot and heavy work of being one of the 3 small chaps who had to climb inside the dragon and drag it round the school field while St. George bravely attacked us with a wooden sword during the finale of the reenactment. I accepted my role as dragon head with as much good grace as a serf could muster. When he really wanted armour, swords and maidens, all he got was a limited view from inside a large dragon accompanied by 2 other small and weaselly serfs, let's call them Middle and Tail, emitting dubious odours from inside the confines of the dragon body.
Lovely.
Middle and Tail looked to me as the only person who could actually see what was going on, to issue commands such as forward, left, swing a tail, that kind of thing. Well, the big day finally arrived, and boy, what a glorious day it was. The sun was out, and the whole village had turned out to see the dancing and the grand St. George and Dragon reenactment. As the play progressed, St. George, resplendent in his silver foil armour, painted shield and wooden sword, was urged on through every deed by the sound of cheers and applause from the villagers and his schoolmates. He had dealt with the challenge from the Black Knight, and now it was the grand finale, where he was to engage the dragon in mortal combat, give us a sound thrashing, and rescue the fair maiden, and then go back to the castle, with further applause and cheers ringing in his ears. The headmaster gave me my cue, and there was a mighty roar, and the dragon appeared. I gave the command to Middle and Tail, walk forward, and to boos and hisses from the crowd, the dragon appeared from behind the painted prop that was pretending to be a castle. Keep walking, I instructed. I could see St. George 10 feet away ahead of us. The headmaster continued with his script, and St. George drew his sword and prepared for battle. Now, until this point, I had accepted my role and had fully complied with all instructions and cues during the numerous rehearsals. But at the point St. George drew his sword, an act of treachery sprang to my mind. Keep going, lads, I instructed Middle and Tail. St. George was waiting as we drew nearer. We had rehearsed this many times. As the dragon got to within 2 feet of St. George, I was to issue the halt command, and we would stop and St. George would whirl around us, slashing and thrusting and generally looking good. However, I never gave this command, and I shall never forget the sound of the thud as brave St. George took the full impact of the 8-foot dragon straight amidships. He went down like a sack of spuds. Halt, I ordered. There was a moment's pause from the crowd, and then they erupted into laughter. The headmaster, having just spoken his final line, "And the dragon was slain," looked up from his script to see St. George flat on his back, with the dragon looking down at him with a triumphant grin, if that's possible, with a large papier-mâché head. St. George recovered his composure and attempted to stand. "Forward a bit," I said to Middle and Tail. Poor St. George got flattened again. The laughter from the crowd continued, and egged on by this, I proceeded to instruct my fellow dragon parts. Forward, left, and the final coup de grace came when I spotted St. George attempting to crawl away to safety down one side of the dragon, and I yelled, "Swing the tail left!" Tail complied with the command and caught St. George smack square on his backside, knocking him forward onto his face. For good measure, I instructed Middle and Tail to move forward and left, and we actually trampled over him as we took the dragon on an impromptu lap of honour. Well, the reenactment was brought to a halt, and St. George was led away in tears at missing the big moment and being humiliated by 3 lowly serfs. St. George never got another chance to shine as he left the school in the summer and went to big school. But I'd like to seek forgiveness for my treachery to St. George and his future mother-in-law, with whom he may not have developed a warm and trusting relationship as a result of my actions and fears. I thought I was going to cross that line out, wasn't I? I would also like to seek forgiveness from Middle and Tail, who were both punished alongside myself despite their protests of innocence, and that they had no idea of what was going on. Finally, I seek forgiveness from all future generations who attended that village school, as the selection process for the dragon parts became much more rigorous from that moment on. I throw myself at your mercy. Yours sincerely, the Dragon Head, who trampled on St. George. I think there's a bit of class warfare going on, and that will dictate what Brother Matthew says, plus the fact he was referred to as the court idiot.
Yeah.
Anyway, meantime, Sister Rebecca.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a bit of improvisation, and he did amuse the audience no end by doing that. However, when I heard the bit about the Middle and Tail being punished as well, when it actually wasn't any of their fault, they were just following his instructions.
They were, indeed.
That turned my decision to not forgiven.
Okay, very good. I like it. What do you make of that, Sister Bobby, from the Priory?
Well, it's country pursuits of old, isn't it, in front of a willing audience. I mean, he really entertained the adults as well with the kind of change of plan. Great leadership,
yes.
Great teamwork, great skills. I do feel a little bit, sorry for the little ones at the back for middle and tail, but actually forgiven for your actions. I think you made the day.
It's improv. That's what it is.
I think he entertained the audience to better effect. So.
Okay, so it's finally balanced. Here we go.
Yeah, well, here's the thing.
Is
I am guessing that when George was, or the kid playing George, at some point will have had to have put in the hard yards of being a dragon when he was younger in the school. And yet, apparently, Dragonhead doesn't want to put in the hard yards himself. He wants to win the battle against George when he's younger, so that he can have the Fur Maiden when he's older and able to play George. And that, to me, says that, frankly, Dragonhead wants life handed to him on a plate.
He's a slacker.
And he is a slacker, yes. And for that, I'm not going to forgive, and nothing to do with a court idiot reference.
Of course. Here's tonight's confession. Gather around, everybody. This is from Pete. Hello, Pete. Dear Father Simon and the righteous referees of wrongdoing. Nice. I seek forgiveness today for an incident that happened way back in the summer of 1980 when, as a rather short, baby-faced 22-year-old, it was proving rather difficult for me to get served in pubs and find a girlfriend. I had consoled myself with a new and powerful motorcycle in the mistaken belief that I would instantly become irresistible to women. The bike was fun, but there was, alas, no magical appearance of a pillion rider to share the good times. My mate and his girlfriend took pity on my lonely predicament and invited me on a biking trip to the south of France. In an optimistic frame of mind, I packed my tent and a spare crash helmet, just in case I got lucky. Hello. Bonjour, mesdames.
I just happen to have one here, my dear.
That worked for you, did it?
Yeah.
The campsite at Antibes was beautiful, and the days passed happily, but I was still playing gooseberry, really, with no romance on the horizon. Then on our last day, 3 girls from the UK pitched next to us. One of them was a stunning, leggy, blue-eyed blonde. There was no way I was leaving now. After a grovelling phone call to my understanding boss, I was miraculously cleared to extend my holiday. I returned from the phone box, different times, to find my friends packing up the tents. Hey, guys, I've got another week's leave. You go home without me. I'll be fine. Know what I'm saying? Just I made that bit up. Though he did say, I'll be fine. That evening, to the strains of some 70s prog from my portable cassette player, which I brought with me, I got chatting with the object of my affections. Jenny was a competitive water skier. Not a promising start. And quite a bit taller than me, and her boyfriend back home was a water skiing instructor. Blimey, she was clearly out of my league. But undeterred, I made my move, finally blurting out, Jenny, I'm going to ride down to the beach at Cannes tomorrow. Do you want to come? I've got a spare helmet. I brought with me, just in case. To my immense surprise, she said, oh, okay, sounds like fun. Father Simon, I could not believe my luck. Praise be to Genesis, I thought. Next morning, after strapping the beach paraphernalia to the bike, including my trusty inflatable lilo, I set off, as you would, swinging through the bends on sun-kissed tarmac with the girl of my dreams clinging on behind. Surely life could never get better than this. Jenny absolutely loved the ride, but instead of staying with me on the beach, she borrowed my lilo to sunbathe on the sparkling turquoise sea. As I watched her lying face up and dozing peacefully, I worried that she was dreaming of that pesky water-skiing instructor. Then I had a brilliant idea. In those far-off days, I was quite an accomplished swimmer and had developed a particular talent for swimming underwater.
No.
Two lengths beneath the chlorinated waters of our local swimming pool was no problem for me. So I donned my goggles and flippers, took a deep lungful of air, then, like a submarine, slipped silently beneath the waves and set course for my quarry. In the crystal Mediterranean waters, the silhouette of the lilo soon loomed into view above me. Rolling onto my back, still underwater, I positioned myself directly underneath the lilo, grasped the underside, and propelled the vessel steadily further out to sea. Well, Father Simon, we must have travelled about 40 metres. And all the time I was imagining how amused and impressed my new girlfriend's going to be by this demonstration of my swimming prowess. That water skiing instructor back home would surely be history after this. Just for fun, and surely no one would object because sunbathing can be an exhausting experience, I splashed her gently and playfully. This was followed by me stroking her shin. What? Now, from underneath the lilo, this was some task, but something wasn't quite right. After giving the lilo a playful shake and gasping slightly for air, I surfaced to greet my bronzed goddess. I then realised what hadn't been right. Her slender, perfectly shaped shin had become fat and hairy. To my utter dismay, I was face to face with a swarthy, tattooed, middle-aged Frenchman in Speedos, wearing a cross and confused expression. I'm ever so sorry, I'm from Weymouth, I said. I left him shaking his head in bewilderment at the eccentric behaviour of this diminutive Englishman whilst paddling his way back to shallower waters. Jenny had, of course, witnessed the whole thing and had seen me as the hapless Wally that I truly was. I had, of course, sealed my fate. And needless to say, for the rest of the holiday, I was unable to escalate our relationship beyond that famous level of just good friends. So I have to beg the forgiveness of Jenny for causing her embarrassment over my foolish antics, but mainly from the innocent Frenchman in Speedos, who probably suffered recurrent nightmares for months, haunted by visions of being dragged out to sea and splashed playfully by a mysterious and malevolent marine creature from Weymouth, who turns out to be called Pete. Anyway, we're calling him Pete, whatever his real name is. So it's always a risk, you know, if you go diving, you go underwater and you think you've got the right lilo, it could turn out to be anyone. It's not gorgeous Jenny, it's the Frenchman, who probably had a Gauloise just ready to go, just in case, because that's the way they like it. What do you think there, Sister Rebecca?
I think that was misguided. Didn't Jaws come out at around that time? I mean, didn't Jaws do that kind of thing underneath lilos? And it's very risky. She could have had a heart attack. I thought he was going to say that she'd actually come off the lilo and was, behind him, drowning or something terrible.
Do you think that would have made it through?
That would have been great.
Do you think
I don't know.
Got past the lawyers?
Read that one out?
Maybe just floundering around helplessly and angry with him then. I think it was, practical jokes on people you don't know very well and people you're hoping to have a date with just never work. And she clearly was out of his league, and I'm not forgiving.
He could have ended up with the swarthy Frenchman, you never know. What do you think there, Sister Bobby, from the Priory? Nearly
drowning the object of your affection isn't really a sure way of getting a date, I think, and it is very, very risky. But I do think, actually, that I feel really sorry for you. You know, you went to all that effort. I mean, you probably were misguided to thinking that you could win her over, but, full marks for having a go.
Yeah.
But forgiven, I think.
Okay.
Forgiven. No harm done. In the end.
What's Brother Matthew going to
He's got a pretty weird idea of how to chat people up, hasn't he? Number one, he uses prog rock. When's that ever worked?
Well,
Number two, he decides to start taking her out into the Mediterranean on a lilo while stroking her shin from underneath. Well, how weird is that? You're just weird.
It could have been quite playful and exciting if you think about it.
It wasn't.
You're lying on a lilo.
Weird.
There's a mysterious hand stroking
mysterious hand. Yeah, that's exactly what
that.
you want. Yeah, no, you wouldn't.
I would.
And here's another tip. If they mention boyfriend within the first 30 seconds of the conversation, that's a big red flag saying, I'm not interested. She wasn't interested, you were wasting your time. Spur helmet or not, I'm not going to forgive.
So the novice is in the house, and we're ready to go here with this confession from young Mike. Thank you, young Mike. Father Simon and the Assorted Rabble. Yeah, that's about right. My confession dates back to 1959, when I was a young boy and living in a small village in Kent, near Canterbury. At that time, it had a main street with a butcher's, a grocer's, and a chemist. The candlemaker had closed. I lived with my grandparents next to the butcher's shop. And what a butcher it was. You see, we've selected a little food it was.
Yeah, I'm loving it already.
Thank you. And obviously, he established a relationship with his butcher.
Quite right.
What a butcher it was, says Mike. Row after row of magnificent meat products. It was a real Bobby Dazzler. There's a phrase. The best joints, the finest pâtés, and a stunning array of sumptuous sausages. Check out the production on this. Only the best was okay at this particular butcher's, and they regularly had queues around the corner when the shop opened. Cumberland, Savoy, Glamorgan, the best-selling Lincolnshire. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. There were no veggie options back then because no one believed in that kind of thing.
Okay.
Different times.
Different times, yeah, it was the 50s.
Anyway, one holiday, I asked the butcher if I could help him in the shop to earn a little pocket money. He agreed and said that he would show me how to make and string sausages. Very important job. Now, his pork sausages were particularly popular. His mix of herbs and meat was justly lauded by all. I was a quick learner, and after a short time of instruction explaining how to mix the sausage, meat, spices and breadcrumbs into the sausage machine, how to operate the machine and then construct a string of sausages, the butcher was satisfied that I would be a help. I was hired. Following Saturday, I sprung from my bed at 6 in the morning and went next door to the butcher's to start my morning's work. The butcher was already very busy preparing his shop window. He greeted me with a cheery smile and said all was ready for me in the shed at the back of the shop. Off I went, ready and eager to please, and started my job. Now, the breadcrumbs were held in a galvanised pail in the corner of the shed, one of 3 pails that stood next to each other. I grabbed the one I'd been shown, and using the contents together with the rest of the mixture, I started to make my work. I was patting and rolling and mixing, and I have to say that after a while, I had made a string of wonderfully thick, beautiful pork sausages. They shone and shimmered the way sausages do. Is that what they do? Okay.
Nicely cooked, yeah.
I presented them to the butcher, who was very busy, but inspecting them, thanked me and hung them up for sale on the butcher's hooks behind his cutting block. Look at that, I thought. My sausages are for sale. I was proud of each and every one of them. Pleased as punch, I went back to the shed to clean out the machine. Well, what?
I know what's coming.
Whilst I was poking and scraping the way I'd been shown, the butcher came out and picked up one of the pails. It was, I noticed, the one I'd been using for the sausage mix.
Oh, dear.
He also picked up one of the other pails from the back of the shed and took them both into the shop. He was obviously going to make his own sausages, so I followed him to watch him work. How different could his sausages be? I was keen to learn. Well, I was amazed to see that instead of carefully making his speciality delight, he was spreading the contents of both pails on the floor around the chopping block. Why is he throwing food on the floor? I was genuinely shocked. What a waste! I was about to ask a question when the truth actually dawned, as indeed it might have dawned on you a while back. To my horror, I realised that instead of bread dust to make the world-famous pork sausages, I had used sawdust. Ground, sanded and pulverised wood. What should I do? Here was a butcher with a reputation. He would be horrified to learn that his sausages actually contained loose drillings. On the other hand, I stood to lose my very new job. I solved my moral dilemma by not saying a word, and I trousered my 2 shilling and 6pence pay. 2 shillings and 6pence, that'll be 12.5 pence. I believe that's right. Is that right? 12.5p? Something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I did. I took my 12.5 pence and I went home. Over the next few days, I was waiting for the onslaught from the butcher for upsetting his customers, but none came. On the following Friday, a knock on the door. On opening it, there stood the butcher. I froze and I was just going to babble on. I was ever so sorry about the wooden sausage. When he said, "Thanks very much for your help. Do you think you could do it again next Saturday?" To my relief, no one suffered from the mix. It was the 50s, different times. No one could tell that they were actually eating wooden sausages. Later in life, I became a joiner, says Mike, and when I look at the sawdust on the workshop floor, it reminds me of my first Saturday job. So Father Simon asked for forgiveness from the people who ate sawdust in their sausages that week, and seek forgiveness from the butcher for not telling him of my mistake. While it's true that sawdust can be the byproduct of bugs like the carpenter ant, I'm sure that none of them made it into our prize-winning sausage. It's a stomach churner, but look, it's sausage day. We're having bangers and mash. It's a sausage confession. There aren't a lot of... Well, there are a few sausage confessions. Not many of them can make it onto the show. But that one certainly does, and it's from Mike, and he needs the forgiveness from Rebecca, Sister Rebecca.
That was a great confession.
Yeah,
the thing is, he said he went to the pail he'd been shown the day before,
yes,
where the breadcrumbs had been. And, what sensible butcher puts the sawdust exactly where the breadcrumbs should be? I mean, you shouldn't really mix building materials and materials for the floor with food, should you? So I kind of blame the butcher. And also the fact that no one noticed doesn't say much for the quality of the butcher's sausages. So for those reasons, I'm forgiving young Mike.
What do you think, Novice? You're an expert here?
Yeah, I'm always one for getting more roughage into your diet.
But not wood. Wood isn't roughage.
That will have been some chronic colonic irrigation, wouldn't it? But you have a carpenter ant. I do know about that. And I think, Mike, you have many stages to confess what you've done, but I fully understand the fact you didn't, and my heart was with you. And the fact you were invited back, well done. And you went on to be a great joiner as well. So absolutely forgiven.
You need to be careful with the wooden sausage. What do you think there, Matt?
Yes, we do. I would say sausages are one of those things that they say that you should never see them being made, should you? So,
Matt, by the way, I've just faded out Nigel's microphone, so it's fine. Carry on, just in case.
I'm over here now.
No, yes. They wouldn't. I've forgotten what I was going to say. Anyway, whatever.
Is that my
let's
fault?
forgive them. They don't. Yes, it was
You're
different
not watching
time.
the sausage being made.
No,
Right.
yes. Don't watch the sausage. So
Okay, we're just going
let's
to move
leave it
on
there,
then.
I
Thanks
think.
very much indeed. Well, they were this week's confessions. Who did you forgive? Well, you might have a shadowy secret of your own. Something really weird and strange. Maybe you've never told anybody. Anyway, tell me. I'll pass it on. Confessions@bbc.co.uk. And the Weekly Mayo is available to download now. Thank you very much indeed.